Welcome to Health Coach for Women. Intentional living for more happiness and fulfillment in your everyday life with your host, Marsha Roopchand-Walker. Join Marsha as she shares her own personal wellness journey, as well as stories from our guests that will enlighten and inspire you to move towards better health and happiness. Now, here's your host, Marsha Roopchand-Walker.
Thank you for joining me on another episode of Health Coach for Women. Today, I have a guest, and a different kind of guest, because he is the first male guest I've had on the show. So he is a cardiac heart surgeon, and today I would like to welcome Dr. Ovadia. Please welcome to the show.
Hi, Marsha. Thanks for having me on. I didn't realize I would be the first male. Quite the honor.
You are.
Please feel free to call me Phil.
Phil. Okay, Dr. Phil. Oh, no, wait, not that Dr. Phil, but this, I'll just call you Phil.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. So I was reading over your information and you have a very interesting story. So you are a cardiac surgeon. And so tell me a little bit about your own personal journey and how you got started.
Sure thing. So I have been a heart surgeon, a cardiac surgeon now for over 15 years. And over the past 5 years or so, my personal and professional life has kind of taken some interesting changes for the better and has led me to where I am today, which is certainly something we'll talk about. So my background on the personal side of things is that I, have been overweight, obese my entire life. And, I grew up obese. That was despite, eating along the recommendations, the U.S. dietary guidelines and all that. I was very active as a child, always played sports, but found myself, getting more and more obese. And then I went through college and medical school. And it continued to worsen. And many times, I had tried to lose weight, probably similar to what a lot of people in your audience have done. Eat less, move more, eat a low-fat diet. And I would have some short-term successes, but ultimately would gain back the weight and more. And about 5 years ago, I was really, at a crossroads, at a loss, because I realized that I was going to end up on my own operating table, so to speak. I was morbidly obese at that point. I was pre-diabetic, and I knew that I was headed down the pathway that, many of the patients I took care of had gone down. Thankfully, I started to come across some alternative information about, the causes of obesity, the causes of poor health, and I came to realize that the types of food that we eat is more important than the amount of food that we eat, and that the type of food that we eat can actually influence the amount of food that we eat. Kind of summarizing, I basically ended up on a low carbohydrate diet, ultimately, basically a no carbohydrate diet, a carnivore type diet. And I have now lost over 100 pounds. I have maintained that weight loss for the past 5 years. And more importantly, I have come to realize the importance of metabolic health to our overall health, and specifically to the heart disease that I had spent my whole career treating. So I have now started to refocus my career, although I still, am active and work as a heart surgeon. I now have a secondary focus on helping people to stay off my operating table.
Wow. That is really awesome. And, and as a doctor, you're presenting to your clients and telling your clients, what they should eat, what they shouldn't eat, and, helping them in their own journey with their health issues, with their heart and all of that other stuff, And so I know that had to been something hard for you as well, because you were like your patients. You were like those people. So tell me now, when it comes to, and that's wonderful that you've lost over 100 pounds. I just want to commend you on that. First of all, that's wonderful. Tell me, how would you say, because I also read something that you mentioned about what we've been told so far in healthcare and everything that we've been doing in health and what we're supposed to be doing is all wrong. Tell us a little bit about that. Go into some details on that.
Yeah, so I think, the healthcare industry has lost its focus. We have become so, we put all of our efforts into treating people when they get sick. And whether that's an acute illness, something that comes on all of a sudden, or whether it's the chronic illnesses that plague our society, like diabetes, heart disease, cancer. And we have lost focus on trying to keep people healthy in the first place. The reality is that the majority of these chronic conditions that are plaguing our society, heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, many forms of cancer, are largely preventable. And they are largely attributable to the foods that we are eating. And we have gotten to a point where our whole society, it's not just the healthcare industry, but it's the food companies, the pharmaceutical companies, they have all, they no longer are interested in keeping people healthy. Quite frankly, they are profiting off people being unhealthy, and they have built a whole system around people being unhealthy. And so what I hope to do is get the message to the people that if you keep following the same advice, you are going to get the same results. And those results are that 88% of the adults in the United States today are not healthy, are not metabolically healthy. And not being metabolically healthy is what sets you up for all of these chronic conditions. And so we need to start changing our thinking. We as physicians and in the healthcare system need to start changing the advice that we are giving that is leading, people down this wrong path.
Exactly. I agree with you on that 100%. And, at some point, I believe it has to change. And with more healthcare professionals such as yourself that are looking at other ways and not just the traditional ways of how we've been doing things, treat the disease when it comes, but looking at more preventive measures before it actually takes place by practicing healthy, having healthy diets, healthy lifestyle, so to speak. And one thing you mentioned is about the metabolic. Everybody's metabolism is different. Go into some detail on that, on the metabolic rate and metabolism and everything.
Right. So, my main message to people is that you need to focus on your metabolic health. You need to optimize your metabolic health. And what that means is that your body is able to properly utilize the inputs you're giving it, the food that you're eating. When we eat, three things, can be done with that food. Our body can immediately turn some of that into energy to fuel all of our activities, and that's, on the cellular level as well. All of the little things that are going on in our bodies constantly need energy. Our bodies can use that food to build and rebuild our tissues. Again, a process that's always going on. And then some of that is supposed to get put into storage in case there are times when, when energy is not available to us. Now, in our modern society, thankfully, we have gotten to a point where it's actually rare that we don't have food available. We don't go through famines like we used to. More importantly, what has happened is we now eat constantly throughout the day. When you think back to our ancestors and even, recently our grandparents, our great-grandparents, they ate maybe two, at the most 3 times a day. Right. The average person today is eating 6 to 8 times a day. So it never gives our body a chance to use those energy stores. And even more damaging is the specific types of food we're eating, the highly processed carbohydrates, the vegetable and the seed oils that are in everything, these fake oils, which have only been recently introduced into our food supply. They actually prevent our bodies from being able to use those stored energy. So that's why people, myself included, prior to a few years ago, can be walking around and be very overweight, but be hungry all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
that's why I now know that it is more important the types of food that you're eating than, how much food you're eating ultimately that's going to determine if you are metabolically healthy or not.
Exactly. And what I'd like to ask now, this is not for me, but just for so many people, we have so many people who focus on calories. What do you have to say about people who like to, how important is that focusing on calories?
Yeah, so, ultimately it is true that
Mhm.
if we want to lose weight, we need to take in less energy than we were burning. But trying to do that by counting calories is the wrong approach. And the reason it's the wrong approach is there's two parts to that equation. You have to know how many calories you're taking in, and you have to know how many calories you're taking out. And the reality is that we are not very good at measuring how many calories we're taking in.
Mhm.
Even if the food package, has a label on it, which is one of my first rules, that you shouldn't be eating food with labels on it. But if you have a label, we're not good at estimating, the quantity of food that we're eating, and oftentimes, quite frankly, those labels are just inaccurate. And the other part of the equation, how many calories we put out, we have zero way of measuring in real life. In a laboratory, yes, it can be measured. And we have some equations that we try and use to help people estimate how much. But the reality is that, depending on your activity and actually depending on the types of food you eat, you're going to burn different amounts of calories. So
Mhm.
trying to lose weight by counting your calories and, aiming to get that less than the calories you think you're burning does not work. And we have plenty of data to show that it doesn't work. All of these diet plans that are out there, and the big name ones, the Weight Watchers and things like that, they know and we know that they don't work. The studies show they don't work. And quite frankly, their whole business model is built around it not working in the long run. What they are counting on is you do get some short term success with it. And then, ultimately, like what happened with me, and I'm sure many people in your audience, it stops working. You go back, you gain weight again, and then you're like, oh, that kind of worked a little bit, so I'll go back and I'll try it again, and I'll give them more money, and that's what they're counting on. But the
Mhm.
reality is that calorie based dieting does not work.
Wow. So, moving on to another question that I have for you. Now we talked about a little bit of metabolism and the metabolism health and things like that. What about for those who say, well, it's hereditary heart disease running from my family, which now for me, I'm using myself as an example. Heart disease does run in my family on my father's side. And that's mainly well, the people who passed away, it's from heart disease. I actually carry the lipoprotein A, which
Hmm.
puts me at higher risk. But what about for those people who feel, well, it's in my family. There's nothing I can do to fix that. It's just hereditary. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, so it turns out that genetics play only a small part in this. Perhaps 5 to 10% of the,
Mhm.
the risk comes from your genetics. Certain genes, certain traits, can predispose you, can increase your risk a little bit, but it's not that significant of an increase. And no matter what your genetics are, if you eat properly, if you do the other habits that are going to support metabolic health, like moving enough and getting enough sleep and managing your stress, you are going to greatly reduce your chance of getting heart disease. And, quite frankly, the reason that we tend to think that these things run in families is because families largely do the same thing. They eat the same
Mhm.
foods, they live in the same environments. And so, that can oftentimes make it seem like genetics is more important than it is. But the reality is that genetics are a very small part of this, and anyone can lower their risk of heart disease, diabetes, and these other chronic diseases by properly focusing on their metabolic health.
Awesome, great. That's definitely good to know. And so now, what I like to find out from you, I know that you have a book coming up, right?
Mhm.
This is really awesome. You have a book called, it's coming out soon, Stay Off My Operating Table, a heart surgeon's metabolic health guide to losing weight and preventing disease and feeling the best every day. Tell us of what your potential readers or can get without giving us too much of everything. Tell us about that and what inspired you to write the book. And I'm sure your own personal health journey was part of that, but go into tell us some more about that.
Yeah, definitely. So the book is coming out on November 11th. It's actually going to be up for pre-sale any day now on Amazon and all the other major platforms. And, my inspiration for the book was exactly what I was just talking about. I went
Mhm.
through this personal transformation. I came to realize how important metabolic health was to preventing chronic disease like heart disease. And I can only work with so many patients one on one. I do have a private telemedicine practice where
Mhm.
I do help clients to stay off my operating table. But, I wanted to get this message out to as many people as possible. We have been bombarded, inundated for many, many years now with the wrong message. And it
Right.
is clearly leading us down the wrong path. Our health as a nation, as a
Mhm.
society,
Mhm.
continues to get worse. And this isn't just limited to the United States. This is a worldwide phenomena. And we need to start getting, new information out there, information that's going to help people to take back control of their own health. You can't rely on the system to do this for you.
Right.
Unfortunately, you largely can't even count on your doctor, your physician to help you with this because they are kind of trapped in that
Mhm.
same system. And so
Mhm.
I want to get this information out to as many, people as possible. The book is, a guide. It
Mhm.
explains what is metabolic health, how do we measure it, how do you assess it, what are the markers and the measurements that you should be tracking to know if you're on the right path or not. And then, what can you do to optimize it? And it's largely focused on diet. But importantly, I want people to understand that it is not the Dr. Ovadia 28-day diet plan.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
is not, what I did necessarily.
Right.
It's a framework that people
Mhm.
can apply to their own lives and figure out what's going to work best for them. In the book, I literally go through, both the vegan and the carnivore diet and lots of diets in between Mediterranean, paleo, keto, Atkins, a lot of the popular diet plans. And I
Right.
talk about what is metabolically healthy about each of them and what is not metabolically healthy about each of them. Because I think, when we look at the popularized diet plans, they all get some things right, but they also can get things wrong. And that's why many people still don't have success. They'll come to me and they'll say, but I did keto and it didn't work for me. And,
Mhm.
I take them through some of the principles that I lay in the book that, it's not that, keto itself isn't the answer. And keto, unfortunately, has been hijacked, and there's lots of junk food that's labeled as keto. And, people unfortunately, don't realize that. And if you eat a lot of that stuff, then the keto diet isn't going to work well for you. So I hope after reading the book, people are going to understand the principles. I lay out 7 principles that support your metabolic health. And if you, eat and live with those principles in mind, you're going to have success and you're going to be able to optimize your metabolic health and avoid chronic disease.
Wow. It sounds interesting. I just recently became a vegetarian. So I'm curious to know what you have to say about that as far as the vegetarian diet. So I think I'm gonna be one of your people to purchase your book here. So I'm
Great.
interested to know that definitely. I'm interested in learning more about that. So is it fair to say that a person would need to understand their own metabolism and how it works and to maybe that can help or what is it?
Yeah, I think it's important for people to, take this responsibility upon themselves to understand these concepts. Because like I said, unfortunately, the healthcare system has failed people,
Yes.
and it is not explaining these concepts.
Yes.
But it's not hard. It's not complex. In the book, I talk about 5 simple measurements that can be used for people to assess their metabolic health. And, they're in the book. If you go to my website, ovadiahearthealth.com, right on the front page, you hit the button that says Start Here. It actually takes you through a quiz of these 5 measurements so that you can, if you know these measurements, it will tell you if you're metabolically healthy or not. The 5 measurements are simple. The first one can be done at home. It's your waist circumference. So you take a tape measure, you wrap it around your waist, best to measure it first thing in the morning. And if you're a woman, you want that measurement to be less than 35 inches. If you're a man, you want it to be less than 40 inches. The next measurement is your blood pressure. You can check it at home. You can check it at any supermarket or drugstore these days, or you can go to your doctor and get it checked. And you want that measurement to be less than 130/85. Both of those numbers, less than 130 on the top, less than 85 on the bottom. And that needs to be without the use of medications. If you have been started on medication to lower your blood pressure, that is an indicator that you are not metabolically healthy. And then the final 3 measurements are some blood work. It's the, very common routine blood work that everyone gets done, as part of an annual physical. It's your fasting blood glucose level. So the amount of sugar that's in your blood when you haven't eaten for about 8 to 12 hours. And you want that number to be less than 100. And again, that needs to be without medication. So if you've been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, it's another sign that you are not metabolically healthy. And then for the 4th and 5th measurements, we look at your cholesterol panel. But importantly, we don't look at the LDL cholesterol number, which is the number that most people, hear about from their doctors. It turns out that that number is not useful in predicting metabolic health. The other 2 measurements, the HDL cholesterol, which is the good cholesterol, you want that number to be higher. The higher, the better. And specifically, if you're a woman, you want that number to be over 50. And if you're a man, you want that to be over 40. And these are all the United States units, by the way. If you have anyone listening overseas, you have to do the conversion. Right. And the final measurement is your triglyceride level. Again, it's on your cholesterol panel, and you want that number to be lower, less than 150. So you look at those 5 measurements. If 3 or more of those are not in the healthy range, you have what we call metabolic syndrome, and you are at very high risk of developing all the things we've been talking about: diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, many forms of cancer. If you have 1 or 2 of those abnormal, it's a warning sign, because we know that people who have 1 or 2 abnormal today are likely to have, 3 or more abnormal a couple of years from now. You want to have all 5 of those measurements within the normal range. And as I said earlier, only 12% of people, only 12% of the adults in the United States today have all 5 measurements in the healthy range.
Wow. That was some really valuable information that you just gave just now. Thank you for sharing that. That was really, I even learned something today about looking at the different panels and the, triglycerides and everything. That was really interesting. And so this can even help people to go ahead, get started, visit his website. Give us the website again.
Yeah, it's ovadiahearthealth.com. So OVADIA hearthealth.com. And like I said, right there on the front page, there's a button that says Start Here, and it will take you into a quiz that goes through, those 5 measurements. And the information is in the book as well. Yes,
that is wonderful. Thank you so much, Philip. I have been a habit of, because you're a doctor, I just want to call you doctor, give out of that respect. But you said to call you Phil, so yes. I will call you Phil. Thank you so much for being a guest and giving us these key, important, valuable lessons that people can use to implement and improve their health. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marsha. It's been fun.
You are quite welcome. And look out for his book when it launches. Look out for it and go and buy the book and visit his website. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Health Coach for Women with your host, Marsha Roopchand-Walker. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to rate, subscribe, and review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate that effort. Until next time.